Hello and welcome to Mr. Recap. Today we see the most incredible Netflix series on Daredevil. Daredevil is a live-action Marvel series that follows the adventures of lawyer Matt Murdock, who was blinded as a child in a tragic accident but was blessed with exceptional senses. Murdock establishes a law business in Hell's Kitchen, New York, where he now fights injustice as a recognized lawyer by day and a masked vigilante by night. Let us look at the first season in episode 1. Matt Murdock, 9 years old, gets blinded when toxic chemicals fall into his eyes while protecting an elderly man from being driven over by a vehicle. Matt's last vision shows him being consoled by his father, Jack. Murdock goes to Clinton Church in the present day to confess to Paul Lantom and beg forgiveness for what he is going to do. Later that night, Murdock dons a black vigilante outfit and a black mask and stops Turk Barrett and the Russian mafia from trafficking the abducted ladies. Murdock is woken the next morning by a phone call from Foggy Nelson, who discusses the approaching appointment with the real estate firm. Nelson approaches Brett Mahoney, offering him cigars for his mother and requesting that he call him if the NYPD comes across an intriguing case. After that, Nelson and Murdock meet with Susan Harris to discuss renting an office and starting their own law company. Karen Page awakens in her flat alongside Danielle Fisher's body, holding a bloodied knife, and is detained by the police. After Mahoney informs Nelson, he and Murdock go to the 15th Precinct police station and announce themselves as her lawyers. Page informs them that she does not have the funds to pay for the legal services, and while Nelson wishes to go, Murdock agrees to assist her anyhow, as they have no clients at the time. Page convinces Nelson and Murdock that she did not kill Fisher, no matter how the scenario appeared, and Murdock believes her innocence by listening to her heartbeat. Clyde Farnham is sitting in the park when he is approached by James Wesley, who claims to have come to collect the money he borrowed from Don Rigoletto. Wesley informs Farnham that Rigoletto has ceased operations and that his employer has taken over. Wesley sends Farnham a video of his daughter Tracy being watched by Rance, who is prepared to murder her on Wesley's command. Wesley makes it apparent that his boss is unconcerned about the loan and instead wants to take use of Farnham's expertise. When Nelson and Murdock discuss Page's case, Nelson contemplates cutting a deal to avoid the court hearing and reduce Page's punishment, but Murdock is against it. Although Nelson reminds out that Page was discovered in a highly incriminating position, Murdock is sure that she is innocent. Despite the fact that the case appears to be straightforward, Murdock notes that the police and the district attorney's office are hesitant to bring charges, thinking that the case is more complicated than it appears. Nelson reluctantly agrees to follow Murdock's lead, but notes that Page is not revealing the complete story. Page is ambushed in her cell that night by Farnham, who is told to kill her and make it appear as if she committed suicide. Nevertheless, Page manages to live and scream for aid. Nelson and Murdock meet with Christian Blake and Carl Hoffman to persuade them to release Page in exchange for silence about the attack on her cell. They drag Page into their office, where she informs Nelson and Murdock about how she detected corruption in Union Allied Construction's financial records and informed her employer. He refused to listen to her, so she told Fisher about it, but Fisher was discovered dead in her apartment the next morning. Page is worried that the same individuals who killed Fisher will come after Nelson and Murdock, but Murdock persuades her to spend the night in his apartment until they figure something out. Murdock mulls over the case and wonders why the authorities tried to frame Page the first time rather than murder her until she was apprehended. Murdock deduces that Page must have saved the pension file, and that her assailants would be unable to kill her without first obtaining it. Page lies, claiming that all of the data was erased and that she did not get the file, but Murdock already knows the truth. Wesley meets with Leland Owlsley, Nobu Yoshioka, Madame Gao, Vladimir, and Anatoly Ranskahov at Union Allied Property to discuss their predicament, despite the fact that his employer is unable to attend. The Ranskahov brothers tell Wesley about the vigilante who freed the women, and Wesley expresses his alarm about the human trafficking scandal. Owlsley attempted to diffuse the tension by stating that the Union Allied problem is getting unwelcome attention and that it must be resolved as quickly as possible. Page escapes Murdock's apartment and heads home, where she picks up a flash drive containing the Union Allied pension file, but is accosted by Rance. He grabs the flash drive and plans to murder Page, but he is stopped by the vigilante in black, who defeats him in a fight. Page claims that going to the cops with the proof is futile, but the vigilante deposits Rance at the New York Bulletin with the flash drive. The article of the Union Allied embezzlement is then published in the press, causing a tremendous scandal and public outcry. As Page is acquitted of all accusations, she expresses her gratitude to Nelson and Murdock and resolves to continue working for their firm as a way of repaying them for their assistance. Murdoch goes to Fogwell's gym late at night, where his father used to go, and begins punching a punching bag. Wesley consults with his boss about the Union Allied situation and tells him that the necessary steps would be taken. Paige's boss decides to fire her because what she knew was already in the news, and he expresses interest in Nelson and Murdoch. Owlsley follows the money trail left by Union Allied, and Farnham and Rance are assassinated, presumably by suicide. Meanwhile, Gao continues to run her heroin-producing sweatshop, and Yoshioka and his men make plans for a specific location in the city. The Russian mafia attacks the dad on the street and kidnaps his son, commanded by the Ranskahov brothers. Hearing the boy's screams, Murdoch dons his vigilante suit and rushes in to save him. Episode 1 is complete, and we'll see you tomorrow for episode 2. Thank you. Hello and welcome to Mr. Recapped. Let us look at the first season in episode 2. The masked man hears the screams of a little boy who has been kidnapped from his father's truck. Murdoch tries to save the child but is severely beaten since they knew he was coming. He is thrown into the garbage by his kidnappers. Santino discovers him and informs his doctor neighbor, Claire Temple. They bring him to her apartment, where she shines a spotlight on his eyes and discovers that he doesn't react. She begins to dial 911 but is stopped by the guy, who awakens and warns her that the men are coming and would kill everyone in the hospital to get to him. The man then loses consciousness. Before he was blinded, Matt Murdoch used to watch his father, Battle and Jack Murdoch, box on television. Matt does not go to bed when Jack returns home after the fight. They talk about the struggle, and Jack begs his son to sew up his wounds. Matt is surprised when Jack shows him the money and questions how he received so much after losing. It doesn't matter to Jack, he says, as long as he fights. Murdoch awakens later to Temple asking him how a blind guy in a mask could be found in her garbage, to which he receives no response. She asks him for his name, but he does not respond, so she calls him Mike. A young Murdoch wakes up in the hospital after his mishap. Murdoch's father attempts to calm him down, but all he can say is that he can't see. Murdoch awakens again, but this time due to a lung collapse. Temple once again saves his life. When she begs for an explanation, he tells her about the youngster and what he attempted. Murdoch intends to pursue the youngster once more. He interrupts the talk when he hears a man on the next level. He claims to smell the man's cologne as well, which perplexes Temple. Murdoch remained at Fogwell's gym after his father was blinded. Two goons entered the gym one day and approached his father. Roscoe Sweeney wants him to take a fall during the upcoming battle against Carl Creel so he can win a bet. Jack first refuses, unaware that Matt is listening, but when his son's future is jeopardized, Jack informs them that he will lose. When the thug arrives at the door. When Temple opens it, she discovers a man disguised as a cop inquiring whether she has seen a man in a mask. He departs when she tells him no. Murdoch informs her that he did not believe the falsehood. He then pulls out a fire extinguisher and throws it down the stairway, striking the man at the bottom. They drag him up to the roof and bind him. Temple interrogates Murdoch about his motivations, but eventually believes he is on the right track. Meanwhile, Karen Page is cleaning up the office when she hears Foggy Nelson, who is ignorant of her presence, singing to himself. To allay Page's anxieties about New York City, they head to a pub and get drunk. They go to Murdoch's flat and make a commotion that wakes up his neighbor. Page suggests they go home as they depart, but Nelson objects. Seaman, the thug, awakens, and the masked man interrogates him. Seaman informs him that the child, like the others, will be sold. The masked man, enraged, tortures him. Seaman tells him where the youngster is by placing a knife exactly over his eye socket. He then slashes Seaman and tosses him through the ceiling. When Temple wonders whether he's still alive, the masked man says he'll live. Temple is ordered to leave because the Russians who beat Murdoch for disturbing their sex slave trading operations would come after her. Temple informs him of her whereabouts in case she needs to sew up more of his wounds. Jack picks his ego on the night of the battle. He phones a friend called Ed and requests that they place a bet on his winning. He instructs them to deposit the money he will get into an account under the name Matthew Murdoch. He then phones Matt's mother and asks her to keep an eye out for their kid. He dashes inside the dressing room after defeating Creel, hoping to make a speedy getaway. When he hears his name yelled in the ring, he stops for a while before embracing it once more. He is subsequently discovered dead in an alleyway, at the location where the youngster is being kept hostage. A thug comes in and feeds him. The masked man enters the corridor, ready to battle. He fights the men, putting tied ropes on his knuckles to make his fists more powerful. He is outnumbered, yet he can recover after several blows. As he grows fatigued, he utilizes the wall to push himself against the stronger men. He enters the room after beating all of them, removing his disguise to protect the youngster from becoming afraid. He then goes out, holding the kid. Episode 2 is complete, and we'll see you tomorrow for episode 3. Thank you. Hello and welcome to Mr. Recapped. Let us look at the first season in episode 3. John Healy was recruited to murder a man named Prahaskar and went to Turk Barrett 36 hours ago to get a weapon. Because the weapon was still fresh from the packaging, Barrett assured him that it would not jam. Healy goes to Whitestone Lanes and approaches Prahaskar, who is bowling with his 2 bodyguards, and asks if he may join him. Prahaskar refuses and orders Healy to be removed by his security. Healy confronts the thugs and sends them fleeing before attacking Prahaskar. After pulling his revolver on the bowler, Healy kills Prahaskar by beating his face with a bowling ball. When the New York City Police Department comes, Healy hides the weapon, surrenders, and demands counsel. Matt Murdock's injuries from his fight with the Russian mafia are still bothering him. He takes a seat and is noticed by Father Paul Lantom, who knows him as Jack Murdock's child. Lantom notes Murdock's scars and offers him to talk over a latte made by a machine at the chapel. Murdock rejects it and walks away. At Nelson and Murdock's law practice, Karen Page receives a letter from Union Allied Construction, which she quickly hides as Foggy Nelson arrives, still reeling from the fun he and Page had the night before. He reminds her, much to her displeasure, that she agreed to work for free. They see Murdock's scars as he walks in, but when they challenge him about them, Murdock lies about how he got them. James Wesley arrives at the door and offers the attorneys significant cash as a permanent retainer to work for him and handle the Healy case. Murdock does not trust him and follows him as Wesley walks to his employer's automobile. Murdock begins to bleed from his wounds and allows them to depart. Nelson refuses to take the case to jail after meeting Healy, who appears to be a little too knowledgeable about the judicial system. Murdock, on the other hand, wants the case because they need the money. Meanwhile, Page meets with a lawyer for her old employer. He wants her to sign a non-disclosure agreement and accept 6 months' compensation in exchange for her difficulty. She is offended since her problem included nearly getting killed twice. As a result, she does not sign the documents. When Wesley enters the courtroom, Murdock notes that a juror's pulse changes considerably. That night, he pursues her and discovers she is being blackmailed. Daredevil beats up the man who is blackmailing her and learns nothing from him except that there will be another blackmailer to take her place. Murdock has Page investigate his employment, but she discovers that he works for a bogus firm. Ben Urich believes there is a new power player in Hell's Kitchen, but his employer at the New York Bulletin, Mitchell Ellison, refuses to investigate it since it does not sell newspapers. Urich is particularly concerned about the well-being of his ailing wife, who is in hospice. Murdock informs the jury in court that Healy is not guilty of murder by the letter of the law. When they return with their judgment, Murdock sees that another juror's heartbeat accelerates as Wesley arrives. Healy is free because the jury is deadlocked. Daredevil and Healy battle. Healy can turn anything around him into a weapon. Daredevil manipulates Healy into naming Wilson Fisk as his boss. Shortly after, Healy commits himself, fearful of the consequences of naming Fisk. Page travels to meet Danielle Fisher's wife to express her sympathies. She is unaccepting and wants to be left alone to raise her children in peace. Mrs. Fisher signed her agreement because she needed the money, Page discovers. Wesley meets with Leland Owlsley, who wonders what has been keeping Fisk so busy recently and discovers that Fisk is suddenly interested in art. Fisk meets Vanessa Mariana at an art gallery and talks about a painting. Page goes to Urich for aid against the guys behind Union Allied Construction. Episode 3 is complete, and we'll see you tomorrow for episode 4. Thank you. Hello and welcome to Mr. Recapped. Let us look at the first season in episode 4. 8 years ago, in a Siberian prison, a tattooed man is tossed into a cell. The man's brother is waiting in the cell with a plan for their escape. They will travel to America once they are free, the brother explains. One of the Russians is now running through Hell's Kitchen. He gets into his getaway automobile. Daredevil, though, drops his brother's body on the car before driving away. Still, the Russian disappears into the night. Daredevil visits Claire, who patches his wound. Claire suggests that Matt get body armor to better protect himself, but Matt believes it will slow him down. Their talk turns a little flirty, but it passes quickly. Matt offers Claire a disposable phone so that he can readily contact her in case of a medical emergency. Matt inquires of Claire whether she has ever heard of Wilson Fisk. She claims she has not. Matt says he'll keep looking for Fisk or anyone who knows him. The Russian and his colleagues meet Wesley across town. Wesley informs them that if they join Wilson Fisk's team, he will quadruple their production. However, the Russian explains that Daredevil nearly apprehended them. Wesley informs the Russians that Daredevil is damaging their business, but Fisk may provide new structure to their criminal organization. The Russians are resistant, but Wesley is adamant that Fisk will bring about change, whether they like it or not. To stop Daredevil, the Russians plan to approach a formidable colleague. Ben Urich and Karen Page meet in a diner to talk about Karen's Union Allied plot and Ben's crime story. They pursue the trail of deaths left by various Union Allied comrades. Ben tells Karen to leave the trail alone, but Karen insists on following it. Ben eventually tells Karen that her theory lacks a solid source and refuses to assist her. The Russians pay a medical visit to their pal, the one Daredevil tortured on Claire's roof. They disconnect his life support systems and inject him with adrenaline. The man awakens from his coma and informs the brothers that he was tortured by the devil. He tells them about Claire and how Daredevil was in her apartment. Wilson, Fisk and Wesley talk about Daredevil that night. If the Russian brothers are unable to restrain Daredevil, Fisk declares he will seek another alternative. Fisk gets out of the car and walks into another art gallery. He runs into the curator from the previous episode. Fisk flirts with the woman while thanking her for selling the picture. Fisk invites the woman to supper and she accepts. Vanessa is the name she presents herself as. Claire hears movement from an unexpected source in her flat. It's the Russians who sees her. Before they haul her away, she gets to call Matt on her burn phone. Matt dashes to her apartment, but he arrives too late. Claire has left. Matt listens for her screams with his heightened hearing. He finds her voice a few blocks away, packed into the Russian's automobile. He attempts to pursue, but the trail falls cold. Matt returns to Claire's apartment and meets Claire's friend. He provides Matt a tip, claiming to have seen them all get into a cab owned by the Venice Taxi Company. Karen observes a man bidding on an old surplus of Union Allied computers at another auction. Ben Urich appears at the auction and informs Karen that she must win the computers at whatever cost and that she must see him in an hour. Fisk and Vanessa have a romantic dinner at an Italian restaurant. Vanessa puts Fisk at ease as he stumbles through their talk. They discuss how Hell's Kitchen has evolved over time, and Fisk concedes that New York City is in his blood. The Russians drag Claire to a Venice taxi garage and torture her for Daredevil's identity. The lights then go out. Daredevil descends on the Russians and begins eliminating them one by one. Daredevil easily disarms the final Russian, who snatches Claire. Claire then uses a baseball bat to knock him out. Daredevil consoles Kala by holding her. Karen approaches Ben at their diner and informs him that she has won the Allied computers. Ben then explains that he ran into her at the auction by chance, and that he was also investigating the story independently. He still believes Karen, an inexperienced investigator, should delegate the investigation to an expert such as himself. Karen, on the other hand, persuades Ben to let her join his probe. They will investigate Union Allied and its illegal links together. The remaining Russians across town want to meet with Fisk. They track him down at the Italian restaurant, ruining Wilson's date with Vanessa. Fisk pushes Vanessa out the door and promises to meet the Russian later. He brings Vanessa to her flat, but the Russian scenario shocks her. She has changed her mind about Wilson. She departs Wilson without confirming or denying that she will see him again. Back at Nelson and Murdoch, Karen informs Foggy that she purchased all of the Allied office equipment using the business credit card. Claire's wounds are patched up at Matt's flat. He apologizes for pulling Claire into his conflict, but she says it's fine. She asks Matt if his crusade has an end goal, but Matt says he only wants to make his city a better place. Daredevil then tells Claire his true name, Anatoly, one of the Russian brothers, and Wesley recount their meeting with Daredevil in Wesley's automobile across town. Wesley believes that barging in on Fisk was a bad idea. In a fit of rage, Wilson wrenches the car door open, drags Anatoly out, and beats him to death. He orders Wesley to grab Anatoly's body and deliver it to his brother Vladimir. He expects the action to spark a gang war with a third party, which Fisk greatly desires. Episode 4 is complete, and we'll see you tomorrow for episode 5. Thank you. Hello and welcome to Mr. Recapped. Let us look at the first season and episode 5. As the vehicle is being cleansed of blood and brains, Wilson, Fisk and James Wesley meet with Madame Gao, Nobu Yoshioka, and Leland Owlsley. Fisk informs them that the Ranskahov brothers, Vladimir and Anatoly Ranskahov, are no longer a member of their group. With this choice, Fisk takes the time to please Gao because it directly impacts her drug distribution company. Meanwhile, Matt Murdock tends to Claire Temple's wounds. He reveals that his given name is Matthew. She has fallen in love with him, but she doubts her capacity to be with someone prepared to jeopardize his own life. To shoot the man in the black mask, Russian thugs mistakenly kill one of Madame Gao's blind delivery employees. He manages to flee, but Piotr is apprehended. Karen Page and Foggy Nelson have a client, Elena Cardenas, at the legal firm. Amo Tully is attempting to evict her from her rent-controlled apartment. Murdoch chooses to go to the police station to speak with her son when Bess Mahoney refers him there. Vladimir has brought his brother's decapitated body and discovers a black mask in his pocket. He vows war on the man in the mask. Murdoch meets with Brett Mahoney at the station and learns more about Tully. Murdoch then learns that Piotr was murdered by detectives Christian Blake and Carl Hoffman because he addressed Fisk by name. Later, as the disguised guy, Murdoch confronts Blake, seeking Fisk. Blake informs him that the masked guy is Anatoly Ranskahov's suspected murderer, and the Russians are looking for him. Murdoch takes his phone and flees. Nelson and Page encounter Marcy Stahl, the lawyer representing Tully and Nelson's ex-girlfriend, in the Landman and Zach building. Both ladies are impressed by Nelson's assurance as they argue the legality of Tully's behavior. Page and Nelson had a date in Cardenas' apartment after spending the day restoring her house. The building is jolted by an explosion. Nelson departs, leaving Page to monitor Cardenas while he checks on the other renters. Turk Barrett informs Ranskahov that the masked guy may be working with Fisk, prompting Ranskahov to wage war on the crime lord. Fisk, on the other hand, has another rendezvous with Vanessa Mariana. Fisk queries Mariana's motivation for having a revolver in her handbag at the dinner table. He promises her that he intends to change Hell's Kitchen and that she would be safe by his side. Mariana notices the explosions, and Fisk explains that they are part of his plan to reshape the city. She is persuaded as the couple exits the restaurant and Fisk pays off the suspicious waiter. The masked man was close to one of the explosions at the time. He was following Ranskahov after getting Temple to read the text messages on the phone he seized. The cops arrive as the two struggled, and the masked man raises his hands as they approach. Episode 5 is complete, and we'll see you tomorrow for episode 6. Thank you. Hello and welcome to Mr. Recapped. Let us look at the first season and episode 6. After attacking Vladimir Ranskahov, NYPD cops attempt to catch the masked guy. The masked guy overwhelms the cops, but Ranskahov is killed in the ensuing melee. Christian Blake and Carl Hoffman arrive at one of the bombed-out buildings. He discovers an injured Ivan and tortures him into disclosing Ranskahov's whereabouts by impaling him with a rebar. Blake shoots Ivan when he fails to divulge where Ranskahov has gone. He then instructs the other officers to execute any remaining Russian mafia members. Ranskahov is brought unconscious into an abandoned warehouse by the masked guy. Ranskahov awakens and threatens the masked guy with death for murdering his brother Anatoly. The masked man tells him that he did not murder Anatoly and that Fisk is manipulating Vladimir. He asks Ranskahov to help him take down Fisk as retaliation for his brother's death, but Ranskahov declines before passing out again. When he notices Ranskahov is bleeding from a gunshot wound, he summons Claire Temple to lead him through the procedure of treating such a wound. Temple hesitates before assisting the masked guy when he explains that the man he is treating is Ranskahov. Temple urges him to use a flare he discovered in the warehouse to cauterize Ranskahov's wound and not to stop no matter how loud Ranskahov screams, partially as retaliation for his abducting and beating her up. Sullivan, a patrolling police officer, hears Ranskahov's shouts and inspects the building. The masked guy subdues him. The masked guy interrogates Sullivan to see whether or not he works for Fisk. He decides that Sullivan does not work for Fisk and orders him to cancel his incoming backup. Instead, before being knocked down by the masked guy, he exposes the masked man and Ranskahov's whereabouts within the warehouse. Blake and Hoffman arrive and form a circle around the warehouse. Ben Urich arrives seeking the information as well but is continually insulted by Blake. Sullivan is handcuffed to a pole and gagged by the masked man. To Ranskahov's chagrin, he dismantles Sullivan's rifle. The guy then continued interrogating Ranskahov, but Ranskahov challenges the masked man about his morals, asking why he was hesitant to murder but ready to let him die. When the man inquires about Wilson Fisk, Ranskahov informs him that they are not that unlike and will most likely share the same fate. The individual warns Ranskahov that Fisk has shut down his operations and has enough cops on his payroll to guarantee Ranskahov is murdered before leaking any information. Ranskahov informs the man about his relationship with Fisk. He promises to inform him of the identity of Fisk's money guy. Ranskahov fights the masked guy who bends over to hear it, and the two fall on several floorboards. They make it through the fall. The guy informs Ranskahov that it was not a wise decision, but Ranskahov responds that it was entertaining to see him bleed. Ranskahov falls asleep again, his heart stopping altogether. The masked guy revives him with CPR. Fisk then uses the radio to contact the disguised man. The two then had a lengthy conversation about each other's motivations. Fisk claims that they have many similarities, but the masked guy responds that they are nothing alike. Fisk then gives the guy a choice: murder Ranskahov and go, or be framed for the majority of the current bloodshed. The masked guy declines Fisk's offer. Meanwhile, a police sharpshooter positions himself atop a building adjacent to the abandoned warehouse. Blake and two other cops are killed by a sniper while arguing with Urich. The masked individual is being held responsible for the incident. Fisk cuts contact with the man, not expecting them to speak again. The masked man discovers a manhole and attempts to raise the cover as a SWAT force prepares to raid the building. Despite his injuries, Ranskahov assists the masked guy in raising the manhole cover, allowing the two to flee to the sewers below as the SWAT squad rushes the building. Two SWAT officers climb to the floor, where Sullivan is still chained to a pole. One of the officers broadcasts that Sullivan has died, much to Sullivan's surprise, before stabbing him in the neck. Other SWAT cops accompany the disguised guy and Ranskahov down to the sewer. They are defeated by the masked man. Ranskahov takes one of the SWAT officers' firearms and fires at the man. The disguised figure attempts to persuade Ranskahov to join him in testifying against Fisk. However, Ranskahov informs the guy that Fisk would have him slain before he can testify. He continues by saying that the only way to stop Fisk was to kill him. Ranskahov prefers to remain in the background and battle to the end. He informs the disguised guy that he must locate Leland Owlsley, who is in control of Fisk's money. The disguised guy is then told to leave by Ranskahov. As the masked guy flees, Ranskahov sings an ancient Russian song and fights off the approaching SWAT squad until he is slain. Episode 6 is complete, and we'll see you tomorrow for episode 7. Thank you. Hello and welcome to Mr. Recapped. Let us look at the first season and episode 7. Over 20 years ago, Matt Murdock was in distress. His ability to hear and sense everything around him had become overwhelming. Murdock was staying in the St. Agnes orphanage after his father died, and a nun sent a man named Stick to see him. Stick gave Murdock the choice of rocking himself to sleep at night, feeling sorry for himself, or learning to use his gift to his advantage in future battles. The wise decision was taken by Murdock. Murdock offered Stick a bracelet fashioned from the wrapper of the ice cream Stick bought him when they first met one day when they were training. Stick, who was opposed to emotion, unexpectedly quit instructing Murdock and left the city as a consequence. After a secret meeting with Nobu Yoshioka, Leland Owlsley is confronted by the man in the mask about who his employer is. Owlsley stuns the masked guy with a taser and flees when the attacker is startled by the sound of an incoming cane. The cane belongs to a blind man, later revealed to be Stick, who orders Murdock to get off the ground. Meanwhile, Karen Page meets with Ben Urich to share notes on their findings regarding Union Allied construction. Page has discovered nothing, but Urich suggests a link between Union Allied, the Yakuza, the Triad, Detective Christian Blake, who is in a coma, and the masked guy. Urich cautions Page to be cautious since he does not want anything bad to happen to her for the sake of his conscience. Page brings groceries to Elena Cardenas' apartment and questions her about the individuals who trashed her flat. As the two converse, Cardenas explains that she feels Foggy Nelson is in love with Page. Page walks away but is attacked by two thugs. Nelson, who is carrying a softball and an aluminum bat, protects Page from their assault. Murdock invites Stick to his apartment, where Stick mocks him for his wealth, furnishings, friends, and silk bedding. When Stick criticizes Murdock's father, the two have a brief spat. Stick eventually begs Murdock to assist him in preventing the arrival of Black Sky, a weapon that Yoshioka intends to employ. Murdock has Stick's vow not to murder anyone, a line Murdock will not cross, much to Stick's dismay. Stick commissions Murdock to take out Yoshioka's men while Stick deals with Black Sky at the docks. Murdock is astonished to see a prepubescent youngster when the freight container containing Black Sky opens. Murdock detects Stick's arrow and stops it. Yoshioka's troops then battle Murdock as Yoshioka flees with the Black Sky. Murdock notices that Stick has also left. Murdock walks into his apartment and finds Stick there. Murdock demands to know why his mentor betrayed his pledge. Stick explains that Black Sky was not a child and had to be killed, which he did while Murdock was fighting Yoshioka's men. Murdock, enraged by this news, attacks Stick and defeats him. Stick is then told to leave New York City. Stick departs, even though he claims there is still hope for Murdock. Page brings Nelson to Urich's office at the New York Bulletin and informs him that he will be needed for the expedition. The masked individual is a new player, according to Urich, but his position on his flow chart is unclear. Murdock is cleaning his flat when he discovers the paper bracelet he gave Stick years ago amid the ruins. Stick returns to Stone to inform him that the task has been done. Stick responds that he does not know if Murdoch will be ready when the doors open. Episode 7 is complete, and we'll see you tomorrow for episode 8. Thank you. Hello and welcome to Mr. Recapped. Let us look at the first season and episode 8. Bill Fisk borrowed money from Don Rigoletto years ago to run for city council, believing that it would allow him, his wife Marlene, and their son Wilson to live the lifestyle they desired. Fisk lost the election, but when Bernie Walker began destroying his campaign signs, Fisk used him as a lesson for Wilson not to be intimidated by others. Bill thrashed Marlene when he got home, blaming her and Wilson for his failure. Wilson killed Bill by breaking his skull with a hammer. Marlene then dismembered his body with a saw, stuffed it into many garbage bags, and had Wilson dispose of the bones in the river during the next week. Fisk holds a meeting with Nobu Yoshioka concerning the death of Black Sky in the present. The way Yoshioka speaks to Fisk irritates James Wesley, who is working as an interpreter, but Fisk assures his buddy that Yoshioka is a necessary evil that they will accept. When Fisk discovers that Detective Christian Blake has awoken from his coma, he employs Detective Carl Hoffman to assassinate his longtime buddy. After Hoffman administers an injection to Blake, the masked guy enters Blake's hospital room and renders him unconscious. The masked guy listens to what Blake has to say about Wilson Fisk, even if it is too late to save him. Meanwhile, Matt Murdock has learned that Karen Page and Foggy Nelson are investigating Union Allied construction with the aid of Ben Urich from the New York Bulletin. Murdock is furious because the two are endangering themselves, but he offers to assist them provided they obey his rules. Nelson makes a feeble resistance, but ultimately accepts Murdoch's leadership. Melvin Potter is tasked by Fisk with creating armor for Leland Owlsley to wear. Owlsley expresses his disgust with Fisk's treatment of the disguised guy. Madame Gao comes to Wilson Fisk's hotel suite the next day. She indicates that she is aware that Fisk is bilingual, Japanese and Mandarin, and does not require Wesley's assistance. Gao threatens Fisk with dealing with the other cartel members without him if he doesn't clean up his behavior. When she leaves, Fisk explodes in wrath. Vanessa Mariana is subsequently taken to Fisk by Wesley, who begs that he open up to her about his issues. They discuss Fisk's origins before consummating their love. During a thunderstorm, the masked person approaches Urich and demands him to reveal Fisk as the perpetrator of Hell's Kitchen's damage. The two agree that if Fisk is discovered, his growth would be delayed. Urich writes an expose on Wilson Fisk the next morning, but before he can send it to his editor for publication, Fisk gives a press conference, stating that the masked man is a terrorist and that Fisk is striving to better the city. Murdoch yells fiercely at the top of his lungs. Episode 8 is complete, and we'll see you on episode 9. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear from me again, be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go. Thank you. Hello and welcome to Mr. Recapped. Let us look at the first season and episode 9. Matt Murdock accepts Father Paul Lantom's offer of a latte because he feels he has to speak with him before taking action against Wilson Fisk. They argue over whether the devil is real or just a concept. Lantom tells Murdock a story about his life in Rwanda, where he came to believe in the devil after a military commander massacred an honest, well-respected man named Gahiji and his family. Lantom eventually gave up and let Murdock make his own decision. As he arrives, Murdock is in the middle of a discussion with Karen Page and Foggy Nelson concerning Fisk's press appearance. Murdock is amused as he maintains his secret identity around his friends who have mixed reactions to the mask's efforts as Urich and the three compare notes and legal options about what to do about Fisk. All the while, Urich and the three are comparing notes and legal options about what to do about Fisk. All the while, Murdock is amused as he maintains his secret identity around his friends who have mixed reactions to the mask's efforts. They decide to carry on with their plan to assassinate Fisk. Meanwhile, Fisk and James Wesley are attempting to determine public sentiment and the location of Detective Carl Hoffman when Nobu Yoshioka arrives, removing France's bodyguard and questioning why he hasn't received the city block he asked. Fisk reassures him by saying that Yoshioka's group may have to defeat the masked man to reduce the weight. Yoshioka decides to provide a hand. Murdock visits the Scene Contempo gallery to see Vanessa Mariana, intending to get insight into his adversary through her. Fisk enters the gallery while the two converse. When Murdoch finally confronts his foe, time seems to stand still. Murdoch exits the gallery swiftly after the two have a friendly conversation. Fisk sees the escape. The next day, after speaking with Father Paul Lantom again, Murdoch returned to work, where Paige discovers from Brett Mahoney that Elena Cardenas was slain by Junkie Jake during an impromptu celebration of receiving the Nelson and Murdoch plaque. The three proceed to the police station to identify her body before going to Josie's bar to hold a wake and plan her burial. Fisk is interviewed by WHIH World Broadcast about Cardenas' death, and Murdoch listens to the news while Fisk challenges the mask to emerge from the shadows. Murdoch tells Paige and Nelson that he believes Fisk is to blame for Cardenas' death since she was the last holdout in Fisk's tenement agreement. Murdoch returns to his apartment and decides to murder Fisk. Murdoch comes upon Junkie Jake while beating up many drug users, but he is too high to resist. Jake informs Murdoch that his boss met him at Pier 81. Murdoch is approached by Yoshioka personally at the pier and severely beaten. When Yoshioka goes for the kill, Murdoch ignites the flammable liquid that had been immersing Yoshioka during the battle. Fisk enters with Francis and Wesley and informs Murdoch that everything has been orchestrated so that he and Yoshioka may murder each other. Murdoch tells Fisk that he will murder him, prompting Francis and Wesley to grab their weapons. Fisk has them wait while he cruelly pummels Murdoch. Murdoch escapes when Fisk gives Wesley the order to kill him. Nelson, overcome with emotion, goes to Murdoch's flat to speak with his closest buddy. Nelson enters after hearing a smash while hammering on the door. He discovers the damaged mask on the floor. Nelson dials 911 but then hangs up as he notices Murdoch's half-hidden face in the moonlight. Nelson then removes the disguise, only to realize that Murdoch is the devil of Hell's Kitchen. Episode 9 is complete, and we'll see you on episode 10. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear from me again, be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go. Thank you. Hello and welcome to Mr. Recapped. Let us look at the first season and episode 10. Foggy Nelson and Matt Murdoch were housemates at Columbia University almost 10 years ago. After graduation, the two became best friends and moved to Landman and Zach to practice law, even sharing a storage room that served as their office. Murdoch eventually persuaded Nelson to leave the famous legal firm and start the law practice they had planned. Murdoch, unbeknownst to Nelson, would exact revenge on the wronged at night. Nelson finally understands. Nelson, enraged, heartbroken, and exhausted, confronts Murdoch about how he became the masked vigilante and decides that he demands complete disclosure from the guy he calls his closest friend. All day, Murdoch and Nelson talk about the past, Murdoch's talents, and how his actions affect Nelson and Karen Page. Ben Urich is visiting his wife Doris at Metro General Hospital when he finds that the extension he sought has not been authorized. Ben cannot afford to place Doris in hospice care, so he chooses to bring her home. When Mitchell Ellison of the New York Bulletin offers Urich a better position, Urich says he will think about it. Meanwhile, Paige is taken aback when Urich arrives at her office with a shoebox containing all of his data on Wilson Fisk, claiming that his wife's health is more important than this project. Paige requests that Urich drive her to a hospice where she wants him to visit. Meanwhile, Fisk prepares for a fundraising event. He had a bad encounter with Madame Gao, so Fisk asks Leland Owlsley to speak with her and tell her that everything is well in the cartel. Owlsley, on the other hand, agrees with Gao that Fisk has changed since he met a lady. Paige and Urich visit a high-end hospice, where Paige has duped Urich into seeing Fisk's mother, Marlene Whiston. The reporter continually informs them that Fisk did not intend to do what he did, piquing the reporter's attention. Owlsley informs Fisk at the event that he has taken care of everything. The individuals fall as they drink the champagne. The champagne had been poisoned, and Mariana was one of the drinkers. Nelson leaves Matt Murdoch's apartment and walks to the Nelson and Murdoch law office, where he packs his possessions and discards the recently obtained placard. Episode 10 is complete, and we'll see you on episode 11. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear from me again, be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go. Thank you. Hello and welcome to Mr. Recapped. Let us look at the first season and episode 11. Wilson Fisk has been in the hospital all night. 3 people have died from the same poison that Vanessa Mariana swallowed, and physicians have yet to provide an update on her status. James Wesley informs Leland Owlsley that he needs him to keep an eye on the Hans funds and make sure Madame Gao is okay, as both are suspects in the poisoning. Foggy Nelson wakes up in Marcy Stahl's bed. She instructs him to lock up whenever he goes, and she will not care about the turmoil between him and Matt Murdock that got him there. Claire Temple repairs Murdock's sutures. She informs him that she will be available for him if he needs her medically, but she is leaving the city for a time. She advises Murdock to buy some body armor if he still intends to save the city. Murdock investigates and extracts information from Turk Barrett to learn something about Melvin Potter. Murdock breaks into Potter's studio and, after a brief skirmish, gets him to create a suit. Meanwhile, Marlene Whiston calls her son, who is too preoccupied with Mariana, who may be in a medically induced coma to recover from the poison, to respond. Wesley answers the phone and learns that Paige and Ben Urich visited her the night before. Karen Page contacts Urich and praises him for being someone she can call after discovering Nelson in Josie's bar, refusing to discuss why he and Murdock aren't speaking. Wesley kidnaps her on her way to her apartment and brings her to a warehouse. He threatens Paige's acquaintances and family with death if she does not withdraw her bad thoughts toward Fisk. Wesley sets Francis' revolver on the table to retain her attention, but when his phone rings, Paige takes up the rifle and shoots Wesley. Paige then grabs the gun and flees. Meanwhile, Fisk, who is in Mariana's hospital room trying to call Wesley, is unable to do so since Wesley's phone continues to ring. Episode 11 is complete, and we'll see you on episode 12. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear from me again, be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go. Thank you. Hello and welcome to Mr. Recapped. Let us look at the first season and episode 12. Karen Page disposes of the pistol she used to murder James Wesley and drinks herself to sleep after taking a shower. Page awakens scared from a nightmare in which Fisk murders her. Wilson Fisk discovers his friend's body and emotionally and angrily abuses Francis for leaving him to die alone. Leland Owlsley tries to connect Wesley's assassination to Vanessa Mariana's poisoning. Fisk posts a bribe on the streets in exchange for information on Wesley's killer. Foggy Nelson travels to Josie's bar to see Marcy Stahl. He informs her of what Fisk is up to and provides her with documentation to back up his claims. Stahl questions Nelson after reading the papers, and he informs her that they come from the devil in Hell's Kitchen. Nelson informs Stahl that Fisk will face punishment and that she must prepare for the consequences of her employer's participation. Meanwhile, Murdock pursues a blind man to Madame Gao's warehouse, where he finds that the employees were blinded by Gao's promise of a better life. After a brief clash, Madame Gao decides to stop selling Steel Dragon and return to her country. The fire caused by the scuffle brings the fire department and the New York City Police Department together. Officer Brett Mahoney approaches the masked man, who assures him that he is not responsible for Christian Blake's killing and that Carl Hoffman is a corrupt officer. Murdock visits Nelson and Murdock Law Office and sobs with Page. Without exposing too much about one another's situations, they both express how they cannot fathom the depravity humans can display. Fisk relocates his mother to Italy from St. Benazir retirement care. Ben Urich is sacked from the New York Bulletin for criticizing Mitchell Ellison, who refused to carry out his investigation report on Fisk's history. Urich accused Ellison of working for Fisk. He goes to Doris, who advises him to start a blog on the internet to have the narrative published. Urich returns home and begins writing when he notices Fisk sitting in the dark close to him. Urich admits to seeing Marlene Whiston in the retirement home, but he lies and claims to have seen her alone. When asked about Wesley's death, Urich had no idea. Fisk informs Urich that engaging his mother was a heinous crime. Urich tells Fisk that his threats are pointless. Fisk demonstrates that he was not threatening. He strangles Urich to death. As he walks away, he treads on the portrait of Ben and Doris. Episode 12 is complete, and we'll see you on episode 13. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear from me again, be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go. Thank you. Daredevil is the 13th and final episode of the first season of the series Daredevil. Ben Urich's funeral, which is also attended by Mitchell Ellison and presided over by Father Paul Lantom, is attended by Matt Murdock and Karen Page. Page is furious that Foggy Nelson has forgotten to show up for the ceremony again, and Murdock persuades her that he is to blame. Wilson Fisk is meeting with his financial manager, Leland Owlsley, to discuss James Wesley's death and some financial inconsistencies he's observed. Owlsley first denies any involvement, but later admits that he and Madame Gao were the ones who poisoned Vanessa Mariana. He then informs Fisk that he is leaving town and will be taking half of Fisk's money. Owlsley warns Fisk that he has kept Carl Hoffman alive in the city to assure his safety and that if Owlsley is injured, Hoffman would go to the authorities and incriminate Fisk. Owlsley's scheme to kill Mariana enrages Fisk, who rushes him and pushes him down an abandoned elevator shaft, killing him. Fisk directs his troops to seek out Hoffman. Nelson tracks out Murdoch in an old boxing gym where he hangs out, and the two set out to see Brett Mahoney for information. Murdoch overhears a cop on Fisk's payroll discussing the instructions to find Hoffman while chatting with Mahoney. Page, Nelson, and Murdoch find a hidden property on Silver and Brent's financial ledgers and deduce that it's where Owlsley is keeping Hoffman. Murdoch dons the disguise and saves Hoffman from Fisk's thugs, escorting him to the 15th Precinct police station, where he surrenders to Mahoney. Hoffman offers the FBI all he knows about Fisk and his illegal operations, and Murdoch and Nelson represent him. Turk Barrett, Corbin, and other crooked officers, Parish Landman, Randolph Cherry, and Fisk's mole at the New York Bulletin, Ellison's secretary M. Caldwell, are among those imprisoned. Addressing news reporters, Fisk is apprehended and brought into custody. After a gunfight with a gang of armed men, one of whom slipped inside the FBI vehicle taking him, he manages to elude capture. Murdoch travels to Melbourne Potter to receive the new red outfit he had built after learning of Fisk's escape. Before Fisk can flee the city, Murdoch tracks him down, and the two have their last fight in an alleyway. Fisk is finally knocked down by Murdoch, who witnesses him hauled into prison by Mahoney. Daredevil is the name given to the masked guy by the press. Outside their office, Murdoch, Page, and Nelson celebrate by erecting a new Nelson and Murdoch sign. Meanwhile, Daredevil patrols the city while Fisk looks at the barren wall of his imprisonment cell. Episode 13 is complete, and this is final episode of this first season, and we'll see you on Series 2 Episode 1. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear from me again, be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go. Thank you.